Welcome to the Photo Flunky Show, episode number 46. On today's show, we're going to try and give you some ideas to help you exercise your photographic creativity. Hi, thank you very much for listening to the show. We appreciate you. My name is William Beem, and I'm not afraid of heights, but I am afraid of falling.
No high places, therefore.
No, it's not a matter of heights. If I'm so safe and secure up someplace high, I don't mind it. But I could be standing on a ledge that's only 6 inches off the ground, and if there's not enough room for me to balance myself, I'm really deathly terrified of falling.
I think that comes with age as well. I'm more afraid of falling now.
No, I was afraid like that as a kid, but it's one of those weird things. It's like it's not so much the height, it's the fall. So I am never going to be a paratrooper.
Okay. Well, here's my weirdness. I don't like milk on my cereal.
That is weird. I know.
I cannot have anything that goes mushy, and the milk's going to make it go mushy. So I put yogurt in my bowl, and then the cereal goes on top of it. But as soon as it mixes, it's got to be crunchy.
You know, the cereal stays crunchy if you just eat it quickly.
I don't like it wet, and I don't like milk.
It's a European thing.
I don't know.
Tove doesn't like milk.
No, but that's because of her mother.
Oh, well, then it's a weird thing then.
Yes.
Okay. All right, before we get started, I want to let you know about Aurora HDR 2017. This came out, just a few weeks ago, but there's good news. If you want to save 10% on it, my coupon code is coming active again. So you can use the coupon code BEAM, just like my last name, BEEM. And just to get there, just go to williambeem.com/MacFun, enter the coupon code BEAM when you check out, and save 10%. And honestly, I am really digging Aurora HDR 2017. It is much nicer than the old one, and I love the old one. So it's one of those things where I can go and do pretty much everything I need to do. I'd say the only thing I'm not really doing in there is spot removal. But I can take just a few of my brackets or a single image and put in there, and I can really tweak them to taste, and it doesn't take a long time. When I was doing HDR before, I would spend an hour or 2 hours or longer just not only running things through other post-processing software and then blending in specific parts of, the images from the brackets just to make everything look perfect. I don't have to do that anymore. I'd say within less than 10 minutes, I can, from start to finish, I'm done and I'm satisfied with the results. So honestly, if you're in HDR, take a look at Aurora HDR 2017 by MacFun. Like I said, I can save you 10% with my coupon code BEAM, and you can get there at williambeem.com/MacFun. I get a few extra credit points for that. No extra cost for you. And as a matter of fact, it saves you money. So, who couldn't be happy with that? We had this little idea in mind. It's kind of an extension almost from what we were talking about last week. We were talking about things that go through your mind, what you're thinking about when you're taking your photos. And I wanted to take that a step further. It's talking about your photographic creativity. I mean, really, what drives you as a photographer and how you can bring out your creative side. Lee, I know for you, you like photography solely for the creativity.
I do.
And it's not only as an escape, but it lets you exercise a part of your brain that, during your normal day that you don't really get to work with.
That's true. I call it my balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what keeps me nice and well-rounded.
Why is your creativity so important to you?
It's an outlet for me. It's a way that I can express myself, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And also I've got sometimes a bit of a non-typical way of looking at things. And this is my way of expressing it in a fun way, because I also have my sort of controversial views on life, and my different takes on things sometimes can come across as I don't want to say offensive, but it has been known to upset people. Whereas when you see things differently creatively, it's interesting. You don't upset people by it. It's almost you draw them in to come and have a look at it. And it's something that I like it. As I say, it's another way of balancing me out.
I think, if you look back at art history, and I really don't want to go down that path too much, sometimes art does upset people.
Yes.
I mean, it draws in a certain audience, and maybe it repels another audience because they think, oh, you just shouldn't show that in public, or you just don't do that sort of thing, whatever the case may be. And that's happened, through the ages. I'm not really worried about that so much when I talk about your photographic creativity. I'm not trying to tell anybody that they should go out and be offensive as a means of being creative. But I also think being creative means that you shouldn't necessarily be afraid to show something that perhaps some people may not like, if it is true to what you really believe and feel.
And that's, I agree on that. I mean, you've seen with some of my post-processing techniques and sometimes the way that I do things or disregard things, if I don't feel that it works for me or that it makes my end results better for my purposes, I'm not going to do something just because somebody told me so. In fact, if people start harping and annoying me enough by hammering something down my throat, I'm purposely going to try and do the opposite just to see for myself if I might like it, because it intrigues me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it's good to just don't let other people issue instructions like the be all and end all and then contain you in this little isolated box where you feel like you have to do this or it's wrong.
Well, that's the thing. It's like being creative also means being an individual. If you're listening to what someone else tells you are the rules for creativity, then you're not really being creative. You're just simply following rules again. And that's no different than using technical expertise in your photography. I mean, let's look at it. Why do you want to exercise your photographic creativity? It's like, honestly, you want to take better photos. You want to take more interesting photos, but maybe you don't necessarily know how to get there. And it's like playing guitar. You practice.
Yes.
You know, or playing piano. You practice and you play and you play. And little by little, you learn things. You don't learn it all at once. It's not, and there may be a couple of moments where you go, aha, I got this. But that's not the only thing. You have to practice and keep doing it and keep doing it. Do it a couple hundred times. And then you start to understand nuances in ways to do it. Or you may look back at what you've been doing and say, I've been doing this all wrong.
Or maybe it's just time for a change. I think that's what happened to me. I got bored of coming home with the same things.
And that's what makes progress, is exercising your creativity. You look at the same things, you do the same things over and over again, and you realize that there's got to be more to photography or creativity than this. And your creativity says, what if? Why don't I do something different?
Yes.
And it's satisfying to explore your creativity. Even if you're unhappy with the results that you get, just the act of being creative is self-satisfying. That's like you said, why you're in photography in the first place.
It is.
Exercising is, like I said, this is what helps you grow as an artist. It is going to help make you a better person inside, because you can come up with results that other people aren't doing because you're exploring your own individuality. And even if you're shooting for commercial purposes or headshots or something like that, your creativity can still show up. And that's why people will seek you out, is because you have a unique take on life and the unique take on your photos, because you are exploring your creativity. Even if you're not showing it in your work, you don't want to be creative with a customer who expects a certain result, but you have personal projects. You go out and be creative, and maybe that gives you ideas or tools that you can use to bring back to work.
Yes, and that leads to another good point, something that you just said there. Not every photo has to be wildly different and creative.
No, certainly not. You know, there's people in fields where they're expected to kind of, well, let's face it, in some cases you're expected to document things. And you start off just documenting things. You're going off saying this is what happened someplace. But then after a while, you realize that you can document things with a more interesting point of view.
Yeah.
By changing your focal length, by shooting something in a reflection rather than shooting it straight on, by changing the way the light hits the subject or changing your angle around the subject. There are a lot of ways that you can shoot the same thing and tell the story, but allow your creativity to show up.
Yes, that's true.
All
and
right.
sometimes you can't plan it. Sometimes you just happen to see it, but you can train your eye to see things differently.
And that's what we're saying, is that you have to be open to the idea of being creative so that you can allow opportunities you recognize opportunities when they appear.
Yes.
Let's say we're talking about exercising, not necessarily that you're doing something for an assignment, but this is exercising your creativity. And what you need to do is you need to change your approach to photography and kind of tap into an emotional side rather than a technical side. Everybody knows how to go off and read their meter inside the camera and make an exposure. If you've been shooting with aperture priority or shutter priority, first thing to do is go into manual mode and get comfortable with manual mode and reading the meter and getting a good exposure. Then you can start thinking, all right, well, what if I want to change my depth of field? What if I want to change the exposure in different ways? It's a triangle, so it doesn't matter. You can get a correct exposure by moving those variables around.
Yes.
And sometimes making that shutter drag a little bit longer helps you in creative ways that you just wouldn't get for something shooting in priority mode.
That's true. Yes.
The other part is you want to think about concepts rather than specific plans. In other words, don't think that I'm going there and I'm going to do X, Y, Z in order and everything like that. You think, I'm going there and I have a concept in mind. And what I'm coming about with that is something I've said before, and I'll probably say many, many times, is tell a story. And don't think of yourself as a photographer anymore. Think of yourself, I'm a storyteller. The camera is only one of my tools.
Yes.
So now you've got multiple ways you can tell a story. I mean, sometimes you can get a story in one photo, or at least you can intrigue somebody. What is this person's story, or what is the story of this place? But you can take photos of a whole or a series of photos that together tell a story. Maybe it's the way that you compose your images that tells a story. Maybe it's the way you do your post-processing that with a certain consistency that tells a story. But maybe it's you're taking your photos along with things that you're writing. But mostly you want to stop thinking of yourself as a photographer. And suddenly now you tell people, they ask you, what do you do? I said, I'm a storyteller.
Yes.
And that's how you expand your creativity, because suddenly you're not thinking about exposures and aperture settings and lenses as a photographer. You're thinking of a storyteller. It's like, how do I create this in a way that it impacts somebody else and they understand? And then you start thinking in more cinematic terms. You start thinking in terms of color. You start thinking of terms of angle. One of the things that Lee and I were talking about, we wanted to do some slideshows to music of some of the parks around here. I mentioned before, we have a site called Orlando Local. We want to do a photo shoot of going into one of the parks, but from a child's point of view.
So you're kind of 2.5, 3 feet off the ground.
Exactly. It's like you look at things very differently when you're 4 or 5 years old than you do as an adult.
You do.
And it changed. Suddenly everything's bigger.
It is.
And you're looking up a lot.
You are looking up a lot, but you know what? You also see things lower down that other people don't see. And I remember when Tove was about 6, I gave her one of my little, I think it was a Fuji digital camera. And I let her I just put an SD card in, charged the battery, took her into the park for the day. And I said to her, look, take whatever photos you want. And she enjoyed it. But I was quite fascinated going through the images afterwards. I mean, she had zoomed into a bird drinking out of what looked like a little pool of water. And I said, where did you see a bird? Because I thought where we were wasn't a place where we were going to see wildlife. Mm-hmm. And we'd been standing at the gates before the park opened, waiting to go in. And this bird was apparently around the corner on the ground, drinking out of a puddle. And she was right there and saw it. I didn't see it because I was, several feet taller than her. It's always interesting.
Exactly. So put yourself in the position of someone or something that you're not, and realize that it changes your composition, it changes your point of view, and that kind of changes your creativity. If you really want to get down to it, imagine you're a snake or an alligator and everything is above you.
Oh.
Or get underwater. A lot of people have lovely photos where they will see a little bit of action above water, and then they'll see a little bit of action below water. And it's not necessarily something you want to do with your DSLR if you don't have a housing for it, but not all of your photography has to be with your DSLR.
That's true.
Go out and get yourself a GoPro, do some video, get a stick, and then just run it along kind of like at ankle height. And then maybe if you come to some water, get down underneath it and see what it looks like.
Yes.
There are all sorts of ways that you can expand your creativity just by changing your point of view.
Well, it wasn't so much creative, but I tried that taking the dog for a run the other day. Mm-hmm. I was running, and instead of, a lot of people have their iPhone or for me, it was the iPhone or the camera in the hand, and you kind of stand almost at sort of a comfortable like waist height or chest height with your hand with the phone, or if it's not up to your eyes. And because I'm much taller than a Labrador, I was running with my arm kind of resting right down against almost down to where my knees are, and just running with the phone like that. And it gave a different perspective.
And it's more interesting when you see things from a different perspective. So changing your point of view, this is also why a lot of people were really getting into drones. And I suspect a lot more people will. When you see a location from above, when you're looking down on it, or maybe you're zooming in and you can kind of pan ahead of you, particularly more so with video than with stills. But when you can get above something and just shoot straight down, you see your location in a way that most people don't. And even portrait photography done that way. I've seen lately people are getting into wedding photos where the bride and groom are just lying flat on their backs, and then there's a camera above them, what I presume is coming from a drone. There are a lot of interesting angles that you can see and shoot if you just stop standing there and taking pictures where you are.
Yeah, people don't want to move around. You get comfortable and you don't realize you're doing it.
Well, it's easy, especially if you're going to be on the move and you're snapping a lot of pictures. One of the things, if I want to be creative, the first thing I do is I want to slow down. I want to stop and think and look and find some examples. I might snap a few shots here and there, but the shot that I really want is after I've been examining something and looking around to see what's different. And then that little spark of creativity hits you. And then you think, oh, that's something different.
But that's another thing. Your creative mind is going to work differently to the next person's. For example, you said you're going to slow down and think about what you're doing. My better creativity comes from when I'm not thinking and I do something and then look at it and think, oh, that worked. I kind of get caught in the moment. We're all different. That's how my creative brain works. For the next person, they may do much better if they're sitting and putting a little bit of thought into it.
And you know what? And you're absolutely right. The reason I say I'm going to slow down is because I am always looking for a story to tell. That's just what I found works best for me for my creativity. I want to share something with people that says, you look at the photo and say, I want to go to there. I want to know who that person is. I want to know something about that person. Why is that dog breathing so heavy? Why is he so happy? It's just whatever we're photographing. I really want there to be some kind of story that draws people in and makes them wonder just a little bit, because they're seeing something from a different way or in a different manner than they have before. And that's not to say that every photo I've ever taken is like that. I've got, plenty of portraits of models on plain white backgrounds that maybe one day I'll composite into something else. But I'm looking for, even when I'm doing that, I'm still looking for a story. I'm looking for an emotion. I'm looking for an expression. I'm looking for a gesture, something that is a little different, that says, why is he or she doing that? Or what does that mean?
Yes.
I want there to be a story, and I want there to be a little bit of curiosity, something that you don't know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the beginning of a story, and you think, what's going to happen next? And to me, that's what drives my creativity. Is like, I need to find out what is the story that I'm telling, and what is the point of curiosity behind it.
Yes. And I think people have different ways of telling a story. If you listen to storytellers, they've got their own different styles of delivery and technique. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the same with documenting your story in photography.
And timing is very important in storytelling. So if you've got people that know how to tell stories, they know just where to pause, they know where to raise their voice or to speak a little faster. I think you can take the same kind of concepts into photography with shutter speed, for example. There are times when you want a little bit of blur to help tell the story, to convey a sense of motion. There are times when you want something really sharp or dramatic. There are times when you want that shallow depth of field to isolate a subject. And there are, of course, you're going to be using your light to kind of carve out features. You've got so many tools, but we've always been trained to look at these tools in terms of photography.
Yes.
But really, I'm looking at them now in terms of, these are tools I can use for telling a story.
And I agree with that. I think it's just opening your mind to possibilities.
Different perspectives, points of view, different exposure settings, and different post-processing techniques. Those are some of the things that you can do. Because like if you want to develop a style of your own, there's a point that you get to as a photographer where someone can look at a photo and say, I know who took that photo because it looks like something that they did. And that's where you kind of get down to a niche that's your own. You get down to a post-processing style that's your own. And it's not necessarily color or black and white, because you can find people that'll do both, but you still you look at it and there's something about the way it was composed, the way it was shot, the way it was processed, and people say, I know who took that photo.
Yes.
And that's when I think that your creativity is really helping you, because when you're unique and you can provide consistency that other people can't or don't, then they will seek you out.
I think finding your own style is something that happens once you relax into what you're doing and you stop overthinking things so much.
From compositional points of view, there's a couple of other things that you can do. You've heard, obviously, ideas of using leading lines to kind of bring you into something. You've heard of rule of thirds, or using, geometric kind of patterns to go in there. But I think there are other things that are going on. One of the things that we were looking at, we're kind of finding a natural frame, with your environment, and your subject being framed by something that was there.
Yes, I mean, I remember wanting to take a photo and there was stuff in the way, and I was trying to get through. Where was it? I don't recall now, but there were like fishing nets and things kind of draped and hanging, and I could not get these things out of the frame. And then I thought, well, actually, these would frame my subject quite nicely if I just move myself and use it so that it kind of surrounds the
well, exactly. It isolates your subject. So you've got a clear view of your subject when the rest of it it's got an interesting kind of texture around it.
Yes.
But you're isolating your subject and you're drawing the viewer's eye into that spot.
Yes.
And that's what a natural frame can do for you. With geometric shapes, people love shapes, whether they realize it or not. Triangles are very powerful shapes. Circles are very powerful shapes. Or it could be colors or repetition. And you know what is even better than repetition is a pattern that is interrupted.
Yes.
So, for example, you see a chair, a red chair, and then another chair. It's like maybe all the other chairs were black or something. Whatever it is, if you find something that can interrupt the pattern, it's enough that's a little bit quirky to the eye. And that draws the sense of, why is that?
And you can play with that because, taking the example of the chairs and the red chair, you could try them where you've got your focus sort of fine-tuned in with a shallow depth of field into the red chair. You can try somewhere everything else is super sharp and see if you have a preference for it.
Mm-hmm. What you want to do, at least I would take this back. This is maybe not what you want to do, but this is what I want to do with my photography is I want to isolate and distill things down to the core essence of what my subject is going to be. And I've noticed that in the past, I have a lot of photographs that honestly are very, very busy. And that's been good in some cases. For some of the travel photos, we look out over a scene, it's bright, it's colorful, there's a bunch of different buildings out there, and it makes you say, oh, I like that. Where is it? I want to go there. But I'm getting to a much more minimalistic preference for my photos.
Yes.
And I kind of want to have things that are just, I want to eliminate distractions. I want to eliminate anything that might take the viewer away from the core subject of my photo.
I think as you progress as a photographer, your style does evolve. What you like does evolve. The way that you see things evolves. I think that's natural when we get older. And I'm not suggesting that, you need to be old to do this. But as the years go by and you're doing something, you will change the way that you do it, whether it's down to the latest equipment, latest post-processing, or just the way that you've grown into it.
Well, absolutely. And I think one of the things you can do to help yourself with this is review your photos and look for things. What would I improve with this photo if I could do it over again? Look at other people's photos, particularly if they've shot the same subject before. How do they see things differently? And I'm not necessarily suggesting that you go copy someone else. There's nothing unique about that. But maybe as an exercise, trying to achieve the same results might teach you a few things about how to use your equipment, how to see things differently. So sometimes, there's copying is, you don't want to copy and present it as your own, but you might want to copy and use it as an exercise to find out how did they do that? And then can I use that technique on another subject?
Yes, and then make it your own, find your own way to capture it.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that I want to bring up, I heard this recently. I was watching on Kelby One. There was a training course on there from the folks who do triple scoop music, and they were talking about how to put music with your photos and how to help your marketing with that. They brought up something I've heard before, but the course phrased it so well. And the concept is to choose 3 words to define the mood, the emotion, the vibe, basically your story. And that guides you through the photography that you're going to do. In other words, happy, innocent, fun. What does that bring to mind? Are you out shooting babies? Or are you out shooting puppies or something like that? Maybe you want to do cinematic, dramatic, and beautiful.
That's interesting. I didn't watch that.
No, but it was actually, I thought the course was very good. And the course really was on storytelling more than just using music. And that's kind of fits in with, what I'm harping on these days with, I want to be a storyteller, and the camera is only a tool for telling those stories. But it really is, what matters is your frame of mind before you pick up the camera. Know what you're after. You still allow yourself possibilities to go somewhere, but what you're after is not necessarily I'm after a certain photograph, but you say I'm after something that is organic, natural. Pick your words, whatever it is that you're after, and go there. We go off to Walt Disney World, we might, something colorful, vibrant, fun, and that affects what we're going to photograph and what we might leave behind.
Yes, I have to say, I've never been able to plan ahead for something. If I'm looking for something unique and different, it's there when it's there and I'll see it. And if I miss it, well, I don't know any differently after. And I think that's where we different. You go in with some kind of idea about your story and you find the things as you go. Mm-hmm. I document things as I see them, and I document them the way I see it, which might not be the typical way of doing it. But when I've got my shots, that together, when I retrace my steps through my journey, that tells the story. So I kind of live the story and then represent it based on what I saw along the way. Whereas you plan your route.
Oh, yeah.
And tell your story on that route.
And the reason I do that is, one, so I stay within the guidelines of what my story is going to be. And I say, and also I want things to be repeatable. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going off to shoot, let's say I picked out my 3 words and I'm shooting with a theme, I've got something in mind, it doesn't matter what's there. I'm going to capture what's there because it may change from one day to the next.
Yeah.
But I'm being guided by a sense of it has to fit within this framework. Whereas I understand what you're saying. You're saying I'm going there and I'm allowing myself to be open to all the opportunities that are here. And yet when you come out, your photos are still going to be yours.
Yes.
And there's still going to be a story behind them. And there's still probably going to be a theme behind them simply because you're going to see things the way you see them and no one else will.
Yeah, I guess I make up a story as I go along. I find the story in my day, whereas some people plan their story and go and find it.
And that is a difference between us, but yet both ways are perfectly valid.
And there are probably other ways that we haven't touched on because they're not ours that work just as well. And I think it comes down to if this is how your creative mind works, follow it. Don't worry about who does and doesn't do it.
Well, the thing is, it has to be true to yourself. And that's the whole point of exercising your creativity is you may not know at this point what your creative self really likes. If you do, that's great. Then you can kind of refine it and hone in on it. But if you're sitting there thinking, I know how to go out and take pictures, I know how to make a good exposure, but I'm not really tying things together, then that's where you might want to look at storytelling or some of these other creative things that we're talking about and start using them to find out what works for you. If something doesn't work, discard it, throw it away. I would not tell anybody that you've got to do everything the way I do because I don't do everything the way someone else told me to do it.
Well, I mean, if I did it the way you did it, I probably wouldn't come out with results because that's not the way my mind works. And the other thing is I love a challenge. But when I'm having fun, I don't want to be challenged to have fun. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's my time to let all the guidelines fall to the side and just roll with it.
Now, one thing we wanted to make sure we say is not every photo is really going to be, or it has to be, your creative experience.
Yeah, please. Trying too hard has terrible results.
Exactly. If you're not feeling it, you know what? Either put the camera down or do your job, whatever it takes that you have to do to move on. You don't have to try and force creativity. If anything, I like to plan for creativity. I like to have a theme. I like to have a story in mind. But if it's a drudge and it's just not working for me, then I'm not going to follow my whole framework and it's not going to work for me. So if you can be taking photos for the fun of it, you can be taking photos for enjoyment, for vacations, for a number of reasons. Don't think that every photo you take has to be a work of art.
Yeah.
Because I can show you a lot of mine that certainly are not.
Oh, well, didn't I just tell you when I was cleaning my hard drive the other day, I said, these photos are terrible. I need space so they can go.
I know. Something else to keep in mind. If you have an approach that's creative and it becomes a trend, then it becomes normal. And after a while, it's no longer creative. One of the things that comes to mind is a few years ago, there was this couple that were traveling around the world. The woman was in front with her hand reaching back, and the photographer had his, holding her hand, and she's leading him through the world. And he took photos of his girlfriend as they were going along. It was stunning. It was beautiful. Yes. It was creative. Other people are doing the same thing now, and they've got very nice photos, but you know what? It's not creative anymore. It's
not theirs. Yeah. I agree. And also, this is going back to something that neither of us really care for, and that is selective color. The first time I saw it, I actually did think it was quite creative. And then suddenly everyone was doing it, and I thought, I am just sick of seeing this stuff.
Yeah, it's like and there's really no reason to do it unless your wedding photographer and the bride says, I want selective color. And other than that, it's been done to death. Just wanted to give you that and a couple of things. If you can't see a creative angle in a shot, then
just take the shot you want to take.
Take the shot you want to take. I mean, get high, get low. Those are kind of really your options. You can go vertical, you can go parallel. And if you're just not feeling it, maybe you need to come to the realization that it's not really an interesting shot.
It's not there.
You can try to force a subject to be interesting, and it comes down to it. Maybe the subject just isn't interesting at all.
Well, it might be an interesting shot. You just might not be able to manufacture a different take on it. And there are some things where there's just so much you can do.
Or maybe you need to come back at another time if you can. Or maybe you need to buy a drone and shoot it from above.
Ooh.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not trying to sell you drones. Anyways, we just want to give you a few ideas on how to exercise your photographic creativity. I hope this was helpful to you, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you very much for listening to the Photo Plunky Show. Almost forgot what show I was doing here. That's what happens when you record too many things at once, particularly after we've just gone through a hurricane. You can find a transcript of this show for free. Just go to williambeam.com/episode 46. And of course, you will find links to subscribe to the show there. If you want to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Blueberry, we've got some links there for you. And we would really appreciate having you as a subscriber. And if you've got comments, if you've got ideas on how to exercise your creativity, please be sure to leave us a comment. It'll help us out, and it'll also help out the other folks that are visiting the site. Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you, and we'll see you here again next week.